Today, I'm going to take a look at a sci-fi film that was very controversial in 2018. And so, our story begins. A meteorite crashes right into a lighthouse. After that, a wall of light began to spread from the lighthouse. 3 years later, the area has become very large, like the Earth was a blowing up ball. For 3 years, man did not know anything about it at all, because no one has stepped out of it. Machines, animals, and humans once visited. No one could ever return, including Lena's husband. Then, all of a sudden, the husband who had been missing for a year returned. She was very excited. It's just that the man who returned was so strange, cold, and very slow, like a different person. She asked where he had gone. He said he didn't know. As he was drinking, she noticed blood transferred to the water. They hadn't arrived at the hospital yet. They were intercepted by the police. They took the husband away and subdued Lena. When she awoke, she found herself in a secret military base. In front of her eyes was a strange space. The people here were all gloomy and heavy, and so panicked that they couldn't breathe properly, except for Lena. She looked at her husband, who did not have much longer to live. She wanted to investigate what he had encountered, so then she applied for the next team to investigate. This time, the Americans sent a female battalion to the battlefield, including a psychologist, a physicist, a geographer, a military medic, and Lena, a biologist. They passed through a strange light wall. Lena woke up and found out that they had set up camping gear. Even the tent had been set up, also calculated from the amount of food they brought. They had been here for 3 or 4 days, but except for the memory of walking through a wall of light, they didn't remember anything else. There's no other way. They could only bear it and keep going forward. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Water flooded by the house. The warehouse was covered by trees. In the lake, there was a very huge tree. Flowers grew everywhere. Lena looked at the flowers in surprise. These flowers were not of the same type, but they grew on the same vine. Suddenly, the physicist was dragged into the house. The whole team immediately ran in. She screamed that something was pulling her bag. Together, they pulled her up. They ran to the shore. The house made a loud sound. A giant crocodile emerged from the water, crawling toward their direction. Weird thing is its body was as white like an albino. It opened its big mouth and spat blood. One of them shot a gun at its body, but it wasn't phased. Finally, Lena shot right at its head and defeated it. They then examined the crocodile's body. Lena realized the odd thing was the crocodile's teeth turned out to be the teeth of a shark. They couldn't understand. The only thing they knew was they couldn't stay in this place long. They continued to walk along the river and found a military base where they could rest. The terror had just begun. They noticed that the previous group of people had been taking turns guarding overnight. Why did they have to guard at night? They found a document bag with a message for the next group on it. It was a memory card. They opened it. Inside the memory card was images of Lena's husband and his teammate. The man cut the other person's stomach with a knife. Found that inside was not a human organ, but a pile of fibers like a flock of serpents. The military medic quickly turned off the camera. The physicist felt like vomiting. The medic started screaming. She couldn't believe this was the truth. The women started arguing. Then, they discovered something even stranger. It was a man's corpse. It bloomed like a flower. The organs had been replaced by the branches, the whole body becoming a unique picture. Lena took a sample from the body for research. That evening, she observed it with a microscope and realized that cells inside this specimen might continue to mutate. Lena walked out and found the psychologist. She asked the psychologist why her husband had joined the supposedly suicidal trip. The psychologist said it's not suicide, it's self-destruction. Humans seldom commit suicide, but always have a self-destructive mentality. Smoking, drinking, or even adultery are a few examples. Lena had got it. Her husband discovered her adultery, but did not want to hurt her. His grief caused him to destroy himself, so he joined this trip. Suddenly, a loud sound rang out, and she put on her night goggles. The iron net was broken. The geographer immediately came to help, but it was too dark. They could see nothing. Suddenly, a monster rushed over to the geologist and dragged her into the forest. Lena couldn't catch up, so she could only go back. The lucky ones who were still alive were arguing more, especially the military medic. Her spirits was already distressed. They continued on to a residential area. The trees caught Lena's attention. Oddly, they had human figures. As if on cue, the physicist said, "These are human. The light here can cause all DNA to be refractive, making humans turn into plants. A species of animal turns into another species of animal." Then they arrived at the house. The military medic looked at her hand. Something seemed to move in the palm of her hand. After that, Lena secretly tested her blood. Her cells were also dividing. She discovered Lena regains consciousness, finding herself tied to a chair. As it was the medic who tied them up, she went insane. She thought the geologist was killed by Lena. After that, she decided to act like the previous group and cut Lena's belly open to check. At this moment, the geologist cried for help from outside. The military medic ran out with a gun. A bear. No, it was not a bear. A mutated beast burst into the house. It has no eyes. Its mouth keeps letting out the geologist's cry for help. "Don't move," Lena whispered. The bear walked around them. When it came to the psychologist, it suddenly opened its mouth, biting her shoulder. The psychologist could not take it anymore. Just as she is about to cry out, the military medic returned. The bear mauled the medic to death, then turned to attack Lena. At the moment that she was about to be swallowed up, the psychologist eventually opened fire and it was killed. The whole group of people had yet to calm down. The psychologist suddenly decided to go to the lighthouse herself. She let the other two stay. It turned out that she had cancer. She had to find out the answer before her death. The following day, the physicist seemed to have changed. She sat alone, looking very tired, like she had no regrets in this life anymore. She touches the arm that had begun to take root. She moves forward, walking. Her roots began to grow. Lena chased after her, but in the end, she only found a cluster of humanoid plants, and the physicist had gone. Lena continued walking towards the lighthouse, crossing the sea, walking through the crystal forest. She had arrived. It had arrived too. The explosive scene of the movie Annihilation. There are a lot of people who are not patient enough to watch the movie until this scene. But there are also some people surprised. It makes them scared and breathless. In front of the lighthouse is a heap of remains. Ribs in a row, skulls in a row, appendage bones at the top. Lena entered the tower. All over the place, she saw white vines. Then she saw a hole. She also saw a burnt corpse. Who is it? She went to the camera to watch. Inside is the image of her husband. He recorded what he wanted to say, then unlatched the grenade. After he detonated himself, someone outside the frame slowly walked in. It was a man that looked very like him. What's going on? The answer might be in the hole caused by the meteorite. Lena climbed inside. Inside is a very deep hole, belonged to another dimension. The psychologist was sitting there, talking nonsense. "Where's my eyes?" she said to Lena. "It was in my body. It will grow, and I will be destroyed." After that, her mouth started to emit flares. Not just her mouth, but each of her body parts. She was split into fragments which slowly assembles into one block, a cloud of stars. Lena looked at it with fascination. At that moment, a drop of blood on her face was sucked in. Then she saw her cells splitting, then splitting again, until the cells split hundreds of thousands of times and formed a human. A human with strange shape. Lena fired at it, but it did not die. She runs away. But outside, the weird man was already standing there. She looked at it. It looked at her too. Lena walked. It walked too. She smacked it with a weapon. It also hit her with a fist, knocking her unconscious. Next, it followed her, slowly lying down on the ground. She woke up, hurrying to flee, but it blocked her. She couldn't push it away. It pressed too tightly, as if it wanted to swallow her into its body. Finally, she managed to escape. She turned in the same posture as it and fell to the ground. When she woke up, she stopped running. She looked at it, planning something. Then she quietly walked over to her husband's corpse, picked up the grenade, and gives the grenade to it. The opponent has changed its shape, transformed into a shape looking like Lena. At that moment, she removed the safety pin and ran away. After that, it no longer had any interest in her, touching her dead husband instead. Holy shit! It is a replicating object. It had just copied the heroine's appearance and methods of attack. This time, it copied her husband's thought of dying. The fire started to burn violently, from white vines to the hole. Looking from outside, the lighthouse was on fire. The crystal forest was also on fire. This alien creature copied the idea of self-destruction and proceeded with the self-destruction. She won. After that, she was taken back to the secret military base. People asked her a lot. She told them the whole truth. It copied me, but it didn't attack me. It is not destroying, just changing the world. Finally, Lena met her husband again. The man had recovered. It's a miracle. She asked, "Are you him?" He said no. Then he also asked her, "Are you her?" Lena didn't answer. They hugged each other tightly. At that time, the heroine's eyes began to flicker different colors. This is the end of the movie Annihilation. The man is definitely no longer her husband, but Lena has also begun to change. The entire DNA structure in them has been changed. She is no longer the original too. This universe is so big, with so many strange things. There are too many things that humans cannot understand, but there are still people who want to go exploring, even at the cost of their own life.